What's going on, everybody? I'm Arda Ocal with ESPN Esports. This is another edition of Coach's Corner. This is where we pick one coach around the Call of Duty League and ask them all the questions, whether it's about their team, whether it's about their coaching styles and philosophies, or how they approach coaching in the CDL. This is one of my favorite shows to host and really dive deep with the coaches around the CDL. And today we have Shane, who is the strategic coach for the London Royal Ravens. Very appropriate, good timing for us to have Shane on the show because the London Royal Ravens are coming off their best result in the CDL all season long. Shane, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, man. A pleasure to be here.
So the London Royal Ravens, let's just talk about this past weekend. Lots to unpack here. What was the vibe with the team? I know that it wasn't necessarily a tournament win, not the result in the finals that the team was looking for, but just overall, as a result, the entire weekend, how do you look back on it and the result for the Ravens?
Honestly, as much as it hurts losing in the final, we're extremely pleased with the way we play, how we played, finishing second is not only like big for a team that's only had 4 days practice. Excuse me, big for a team that's only had 4 days practice. It's massive in terms of the points we needed to gain to push the higher seeds going into the world champs at the end of the season. So we're all really pleased with it. Obviously, sucks that we didn't win, but at the end of the day, we're just trying to gain points. That was much needed, and we have to keep up. We have to keep this going to hopefully sneak in a top four spot by champs.
And the standings matter even more, even though in the new playoff format, every team makes the playoffs. The positioning is really important here, right? So London right now is in 6th place. So when you look at that, how important is it for you to say, look, we got to keep grinding. We got to get to that. Like, is that a necessity for this team to get into a top 4 position?
It's not like obviously a necessity because you like you said, every team goes there regardless. But obviously, you want to put yourself in the best position to win the event. The best position to win the event is always play as least games as possible. Then you have less chances of losing early on, stuff like that. I mean, obviously, we want to go in with a top 4 seed. That would be fantastic. I think the prize money you're guaranteed is insane. And then, of course, you avoid one of the super teams in the first game, and that sounds like fantastic news to anyone.
So you mentioned only having a few days to practice. That's obviously because Zero joined the lineup. I want to ask, actually, in terms of practicing, I want to dive deep into how Zero joined this lineup. But first, one of the things that really stuck with me this weekend was Chicago mentioned that they had very limited time to scrim with Prestini, especially on domination. I think they said they only had like 1 or 2 scrims in that game mode before going into this weekend. Take me into the scrims with Zero and how much practice the team was able to have before the last tournament weekend.
So in total, I think we got about 7 sets of practice in, which is like 4 days, 3.5 days worth of practice. And I think Chicago had about roughly the same. I'm pretty sure. I don't know if I'm correct that they started about the same time as we did with Prestini. So it's quite funny that both teams made the final. It quite clearly shows that the changes helped quite a bit. But yeah, the practice going into the event was insane. Honestly, judging from our practice, we kind of knew we were going to get top 2. I mean, you might say it's quite delusional going into it because there was some very good teams at the event. But practice was going really well. Every team he plays, it's pretty comfortable in practice, to be honest. But obviously, that's just practice. Doing it in grand finals is another matter. And obviously, when you play a team like Chicago in the grand finals, probably have 50, 60 event wins between them. It shows the caliber of team they can be and the monster they turn into in the grand final.
What was when Zero joined, even that first scrim, was there an instant chemistry between Zero and the rest of the team? What was that like?
Yeah, there was an instant chemistry with Zero. Trey, he teamed with at least half the guys in the team on the Red Reserve team last year, so they already knew each other well. And obviously, it's not necessarily important to getting off to like a good start or a honeymoon period, as they call it in COD, in terms of like people knowing each other already, but it gives it more chance of working straight away, and luckily it did.
Okay, so take me as much as you can, take me into the conversations on when Zero even gets on the radar, or even when the team believes a change is necessary. Like, when did those conversations start happening that you were aware of, that you were hearing or even participating in? Maybe something needs to change here with the Royal Ravens in order to improve.
So after our event before this one, we had a bad event. We ended up losing to OGLA who at the time were regarded as like one of the worst teams in the league. But that was unfortunately that was just the time that team found the form that everybody knew they had. It's one of that roster is one of the most powerful rosters of the year, but obviously they were underperforming. So after we lost to them, we had to discuss a discussion about making a team change, and Jared was unfortunately on the wrong end of that. But no disrespect to Jared or anything, the practice with Jared going into the event that we did bad at was flawless, just as it was going into the last event we did really well. But for whatever reason, and this isn't on Jared whatsoever, we just weren't clicking in game. And honestly, we were all as coaches, as teammates and management, we were all scratching our heads like, if practice is going this well, why is it not going well in a tournament game? And honestly, because we didn't know, we just thought we'd try a team change and just to see if it would work. And so far it has. But like I said before, practice was going just as well as it did before the last event, and it didn't go too great the one before that. So got to keep grinding hard, keep working on the little things, and we should be able to iron out all those little mistakes that we keep making.
Do you think it was a chemistry thing? Was it a big moment thing? Was it a tournament weekend thing? Like when you look back on it now, is there anything that you can identify?
Honestly, it's so hard to say because when speaking to all the players as well, we've all sat there like, if it goes really well in practice and knowing all the guys really well, coaching them last year, knowing them for a few years, they don't get nervous in these big moments. And I've seen them on stage playing for a couple of $1 million and not getting nervous. So why on earth would they be getting nervous in a series we're playing from our bedroom for effectively seeding points, you know? And then it's just a strange one really, and we're just going to keep trying to identify as many of the small problems as we can and hopefully avoid any of the bad placements like that again.
So you have the conversations, you decide a change is necessary. Jared is the one that's coming out. So when did Zero in particular enter the fray or get on your radar in terms of somebody that you would identify to bring onto the team?
So at first we were going to use one of our substitutes, Mad Cat, but unfortunately due to what's going on in the world and America were shutting down the borders totally to internationals, so Mad Cat couldn't fly out, and then that left us in a situation where we want to try something new, and there isn't really much available. And then we found out that Zero was available, so we got him in from New York, and he fit in really well. The team clicked straight away in practice, and it worked straight away the first event as well. The next event, though, I'm pretty sure we've got quite the hard group, so we have to practice really hard and do even better than last time.
We'll talk about that in a second. That's fascinating that like just the world situation leads to like so if it were a different situation, if there was no pandemic, if we were as we were several months ago, you would have gone with a substitute as opposed to looking outside your walls.
Well, yeah. Well, this is the second time this has happened. We signed Nasty from the amateur scene in the UK, one of the top up and coming players, 3 or 4 months ago. Same situation. We flew him out to America just before the borders completely shut, and then obviously because of visa issues, he wasn't able to play after either. So it's happened twice to us now. It's pretty unlucky in the European camp over here.
Well, Zero's a great addition, right? I mean, he's an
Fantastic player.
accomplished player and he fit like a glove with this team. What were the initial conversations like? Like when you found out that he was available, what were maybe you weren't part of the conversations, but like what did the rest of the team say? Was he a name that was consistently brought up by his former Red Reserve teammates?
As soon as we knew like it was an option, then he was the first guy. He was the first guy that got brought up. I mean, he was left in a bad situation. Obviously, the New York team he was on wasn't succeeding, so they ended up replacing him. We all know full well like the ceiling of skill level that Trey has, and we wanted to like help get that back. He'll be the first to say like he wasn't. He was a bit of like he was underperforming with that New York team, but I don't know how happy he was there or how comfortable he was there. As soon as he joins us, he's a different player. Like the Trey that we've all known from years past, and if we can keep getting the best out of him, it's hard to say how far we can go.
So he comes in. You have limited time on scrims. What about the team's performance over the entire weekend? If we go through some of the games, there were some close games, but in the end, London were able to make it convincingly to the final. What do you make of some of those games against against LA Gorillas, getting that revenge match against OGLA to knock them out of the tournament? Some of those preliminary matches before getting into the finals. What are some of your takeaways there?
The LA Gorillas game, our first game, we knew that even though I think they're maybe bottom of the league, we knew that was going to be a tough game to play regardless of standings, stuff like that. We've practiced against them. We know how other teams practice against them, and they have improved quite a bit. So we weren't going into that game thinking it's going to be a walkover whatsoever. Funnily enough, we were walking into the New York game like a lot more confident. Obviously, we have having Trey on our team. Obviously, him being dropped by them, he has that extra gear to go into now. That extra gear to essentially put them down, make them regret dropping him. And when that happens to a player, it's either going to go one or two ways. It's going to go really bad for the player that got dropped, or fantastically well and really bad for the team that dropped him. Luckily, it went for the latter for us. And props to Trey. It was a pressure moment for him, and he completely thrived under it and played extremely well versus New York. Going into the OGLA game, that team is a powerhouse on paper, an absolute powerhouse, regardless of where they are in the standings. Like any team with Slasher in it is going to be a successful team. And and they were always going to find their form eventually. Obviously, we were back after, I think it was a 3-0 the last time we lost to them. So we needed to bounce back because obviously that was effectively what led us to making the team change. So we wanted to bounce back versus them. Again, it was a very close series, but playing against a team like that, it's always going to be a tough one. But then going into the finals, it's a tough one, really. It just shows what happens when you can play a team that experienced. We'll get another chance against them, that's for sure. But I've got to give Chicago props with a new player, just the same as we did. They played absolutely awesome in the final.
They have a lot of accomplished players and world champions on that team, right? And there's a lot of synergy there with T2P and the Twins, etc. But were you surprised at all by that team?
No, not necessarily. You could tell a team change was coming. Prestini joining surprised me a little bit, to be honest, because obviously with all the CDL things now, it's not as easy as it is just to pick up new players left and right. And obviously Prestini must have been an extremely valuable player to any franchise coming off the back of back-to-back event wins last year, performing extremely well at both. So I wasn't sure if anybody would let him go, but obviously he's back with his brother now, and that's always based on history. It's worked really well in the past.
Other than the final, the Royal Ravens won game one of every game in that series on Hardpoint. I'm wondering, is that deliberate, like in the sense that are you telling the guys, hey, like right out of the gates, be aggressive, get that first victory? Is that part of the game plan?
Well, part of the game plan is essentially just to win every single map, to be honest. I mean, but one thing we've lacked on was winning one of the first two game modes. Before this event, I think we had some terrible S&D record. Our respawn was so inconsistent, and going into this event or after this event, I'm pretty sure we went like 6-1 in search and destroy. With we had a bit of practice on it, but the practice was really efficient. And then, like you said, we won every game one. If you win every game one, you're instantly in pole position. Do you know what I mean? And putting the other team under pressure.
So you mentioned your next event. So you sit the next one out in Minnesota, and that's an interesting one, Shane, because who people would normally consider to be the top three teams, Chicago, Dallas, and Atlanta, or at least in that conversation, they're all in action in that one, but London is not. So are you happy in the sense that you'll be able to watch this one from home and see how that shakes down, or would you rather have your team compete in a tournament like this with all the big teams involved at this point in the season?
I think the break's pretty beneficial to us. I mean, just simply because we're a new team, and now we have more time to work on things. Simply because we can do that in 4 days practice. Who's to say what we can do in a month, you know? So obviously the annoying thing about it is other teams are going to gain points on us or get extra points ahead of us. But hopefully, like the teams like Chicago, Atlanta, and Dallas, they can put some of the teams down that we're competing against. And that's what we need, really. We know it's going to be extremely tough to take over one of the top three. The top 4 spots up for grabs, though. And hopefully the top 3, they beat everyone they can beat, keep them all as far away from us as possible, and we'll try to seize the opportunity when we can.
So how do you prepare for the Paris Legion home series? That's when you're in action next June 19th to 21st. And actually your first game is against Dallas. So like you're hitting the ground running, right?
Right in the deep end.
Exactly. When does preparation begin? How much time off do you give to the players? Like how does scheduling work this far out? I mean, You have several weeks, or what is it, 3 weeks before the tournament itself. So what does week one look like versus, say, the week of?
So week one, we give the players a couple of days off, and basically week one we put a lot of focus into like we had a couple of days of practice. We had little things like Trey was coming here from New York, so we'd end up missing a day of practice for stuff like that. And what is it? Obviously we have a lot of Warzone tournaments to play. Obviously we try to put a little bit of focus into players branding and stuff like that as well. And obviously these Warzone tournaments, there's decent money on the line. It's great to boost stream view and stuff like that. But now this week started, we're back to full scrims again every single day. So obviously and the plan is just to work really hard, work harder than last time. Obviously we're pleased with a second place, but at the same time it's not first place. No one's happy unless you win. There's always tears at the end of it regardless. So you've got to keep working hard, working out the little mistakes day by day, and hopefully come into the next event as well perfected as possible.
Can you tell us anything about the Warzone weekend? Or are you going to keep it a mystery?
No, I can't, I'm afraid.
Fair enough. I had to ask. Fair enough. Fair enough. That's totally fair. Let's talk about you as a coach. So you are the strategic coach of the London Royal Ravens. There is an entire coaching staff. What does that title mean? What do you occupy as far as a coach for the Royal Ravens?
Honestly, in the Ravens, we have luckily, we have a quite shared job role sort of thing. Like we all pitch in where we can. So obviously, just make it easier for everyone. Like last year, I was like a solo coach for reciprocity. And not only coaching, I was doing all the stats for myself and all stuff like that. And it is a heavy workload. Luckily this year, obviously, there's more money involved in the CDL, so these companies have more power to, like I said, help with workload and stuff like that. So yeah.
Is there any role in particular? Like, are the roles defined? Is it fluid? Like, how does coaching with this many people, and like you said, everybody contributes? Is there specific ways in which you contribute, or is it always a team effort?
Obviously, like Joe's the main guy. Joe's the head coach, like one of the smartest players of all time. So he's always going to be the leader in scrim and stuff like that. I mean, I've always wanted a team with a guy as well. So I'm happy to work with him. And Dom is another just an old school, old man, old veteran like I am. And I think as a three we work really well together. We all provide different opinions. We do debate about things, and I think that can only help with finding the right answer, rather than just one person being the all-seeing eye and what says goes, and we all seem to find the right answer vast majority of the time.
Let me ask it this way. Which areas, whether it's a game mode, whether it's a specific style, or even a coaching method for the players, where do you feel you excel as a coach?
More of developing the small things of players, making the right decisions, helping with communication. It's just the tiny things that players don't necessarily think about. But they do you know what I mean? They do them, but they don't necessarily think about them. Therefore, it's hard for them to know how to improve them. I think that's always a thing I've really excelled on. And obviously, the more time I work with the guys, the more time we can develop those sort of characteristics.
Talk to me about Wuskin a little bit. How he seems to always be at the top of the statistical tables. Whenever I look at the numbers, he is just the stat god, right? Like he is, especially sniping, just unbelievable. What makes
that's insane.
Isn't it? Like what makes him so special?
He's a hard worker, Brad is, and he'll say it himself. Last year wasn't the best year for him. He was more of the player on our old reciprocity team that, in my opinion, he was so key. It was unbelievable because he obviously wasn't top statistically, but he would make the team stick. He was like the glue of the team. Kept the pacing right all the time, and he played a completely different role to last year. This game, I guess he's just used that last year as extra motivation. He's working extremely hard straight off the start. The game suits him more. He's always been a main AR player, and the game's obviously it's quite suited for main ARs this game. Honestly, I've got no comments on his sniping. I don't know how he does it. It's just he's in a world of his own in that department. From the start of the game, it's like he started with all these insane stats sniping, and from the last event, whatever the stat, I think it was 28, 29 kills he got, and the next guy below him was 10. I'm not going to take any credit for that, nor any other of the coaching staff. We can't explain that. He's a freak of nature, to be honest.
He really is. It's just you just know when you see a sniping leaderboard, you don't even have to look at who's number one. You just assume at this point.
Yeah,
that's how proficient he's become.
I mean, it's working perfectly for us as well. You can tell in Search and Destroy, there's certain maps that people are scared to play us against, and certain sites on certain maps that people are scared to play us against. And I mean, playing against some teams last year that had that same fear factor, it is not good to play against as a coach and as a player.
What about you as a coach? I mean, this is not your first rodeo, obviously. You mentioned team reciprocity before this. When did you know in your career that coaching was going to be in your future?
Honestly, it wasn't something I completely thought about. It was like same thing, I guess, in other sports. You come into the end of your playing career, a lot more washed up than I used to be, but like still holding on to the dream, I guess. Like didn't want to go back to like a normal life, something like that. It was on the World War II years, so 2 years ago. I was teaming with Dom, actually, the other coach with me, and we weren't in a very good team. We couldn't even pull like support for events, like in terms of funding, because the company we were with pulled out. Excuse me. And luckily, thank you to Duncan, the owner of Scuff Gaming, he paid for us out of his own pocket to go to the final Birmingham event. As you can imagine, as two 26-year-olds who don't play as much COD anymore, we didn't do very well. And then after that is like, I knew that like I need to do something else. Like I'm too old to do this and not get paid for it, sort of thing. So luckily, with Unilad, it was with Shanee, Wiskins, Alex, and Zach. They picked me up to coach them, but it was like off the books because I was a Unilad were going with some stuff, so I wasn't getting paid by Unilad. Luckily, those guys paid for me out of their own pocket, and
Oh,
they
wow.
ended up doing like pretty well that year. And so they took me on board the year after with Reciprocity, and obviously Reciprocity was a fantastic organization. They moved us to Las Vegas and stuff like that. So just from that little moment of the guys like Wiskins and Sean, who are still here today, paying for me out of their own pocket, it enabled me to obviously stay here and stick around the esports scene, because honestly, a week before they started doing that, I was about to go get an office job, and that would have been 10 years of Call of Duty career just honestly down the drain. So thank God for that.
What a show of respect that is, even, right? For the org not to have the funds to pay, but then the players saying, no, 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 he deserves this. He's going to be compensated for his efforts.
Yeah, and honestly, I'll never stop being thankful for that because it's completely changed my life around.
Did you think of anything else? Did casting come to mind, analysis work, or even something else behind the scenes other than
Yeah,
coaching?
yeah, of course. I've done analyst work for events in the past, but obviously there's an absurd amount of competition with that, and it's not as sustainable because obviously it's an event-to-event basis, and the CDL and CWI, they already had like a extremely good talent staff. So I was just planning on working with a friend of mine, like in an office. It would have been pretty decent money, but obviously not something that is the dream job that we've all been doing for the last however many years. So thank God for those guys.
So when did it click in, when you're working with Unilat or even Reciprocity, like when did it click in that this is going to be a viable long-term career option for you as a coach, as a Call of Duty League coach?
It was going into when I first joined Reciprocity and like the league fully started developing into the format it is now. That was when it like started realizing like there's a big future in anything, any like job related in Call of Duty esports. To be honest, it's a game that's completely on the up. Obviously, we went into franchising and everything, all the crazy things that are happening in the world. Obviously, like put a bit of a dent in, I guess, Activision's planned progress with like coronavirus and stuff like that. So I'm sure next year it will bounce back. I mean, Activision are doing a wonderful job with everything that's going on, and they've managed to pull this off. They're still putting on an awesome show. The viewership's still really good. So I have to give them props too for what is it, keeping the show going. Because like any other sport, a lot of other sports cancelled or postponed for whatever for the same reason. So props to them.
You and the team, I mean, we've seen a lot of reaction from the online league, both positive and negative, right? Whether it's servers or just the fact that it's happening. I mean, there's plenty of chatter about the online format. What is the consensus but for yourself and for the Royal Ravens players as it pertains to the online league?
We're content with it, like there's like way bigger things going on in the world than it's like the fact that we still get to do our jobs, albeit from the bedrooms. But at the same time, it's like there's people in the world that have nothing. Like the people in the world that have lost jobs because of it. Do you know what I mean? And we still get to do the same thing from our bedroom. Obviously, it's not at the peak of competitive integrity, but do you know what I mean? It could be a lot worse.
Let's end on this. The whole scraps water bottle thing. I asked the commissioner, right? I asked the commissioner. I said, look, like there's been some referee discrepancies or even some issues, not just for the Royal Ravens, but across the league. Like there have been several examples, and The commissioner seemed pretty confident that this will be mitigated and hopefully minimize these kind of situations. What do you take away from all of that? Like, what would a solution be to minimize these kind of things, whether it's no, you're fine on 100 ping, or scraps is away and then all of a sudden there's a disqualification? Like, how do we fix that?
Well, the scraps one is like a kind of a niche one, to be honest. I think he was told that there's a 5 to 10 minute delay, because of whatever reason, I guess in production or something like that. So they're going to start in 5 to 10 minutes. So he went to go fill his water bottle up, because obviously CDL has, you have to, like, you can't have like different brands of water, like that they're not like affiliated with and stuff like that. So he went to go put it into the CDL bottles. But after they told him it was 5 to 10 minutes, I'm pretty sure they started within 2 minutes later.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, obviously it's just a mishap, but to avoid that in the issue, all they'd have to do is go through every single player, make sure they're ready, and which they do now. And obviously, like, it's hard for them to fix these problems until they encounter them, and it seems to always be us that are on the wrong end of that. But at the same time, it happens. Obviously, we went down a map to Atlanta. We ended up losing that series, and that did kind of set the tone for the whole tournament after that, which is sad. But obviously, as professionals, we can't let that get to us. But then, honestly, after that, it's been going pretty smoothly so far. So hopefully they continue.
So it's safe to say that, at least as it pertains to situations like that, the league is in a better position today than it was?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay.
I mean, like I said, it's hard to fix these problems because you don't think about them until you encounter them, and this whole situation is completely new to everyone, but they're doing a really good job.
Shane is the strategic coach of the London Royal Ravens. Generous with your time. Thank you very much for joining us here on Coach's Corner. That's an amazing story, by the way. Just the fact that the players would pay you out of pocket. I love that. That's a
Yeah.
phenomenal. What was that? Actually, I actually just want to ask, like, what was that conversation like? Like, did you tell them you weren't being paid by the org? Like, how did that even come up?
I don't know if I can go into details about why the org couldn't afford to take anyone on, but when I told them about it, they all knew the details of it as well, because it was affecting them too. It ended up affecting them in the long run too. But they completely understood it. They had no idea that I wasn't getting paid until I told them about 6 weeks later. And as
Oh,
soon as I told
wow.
him that, then they were shocked, to be honest, and I was completely surprised. I'm not trying to be a bit soft, but it did, like, nearly make me shed a tear. Just nearly make me shed a tear a bit when they offered. So, like I said before, I'll never stop being appreciative of that, and it's literally put me in a position to where I am today, to be honest.
Yeah, do they ever bring it up in perfect joking situations? Like, you're trying to coach them and they're like, hey, remember that time that I paid you out of pocket to be
Yeah,
a coach?
if I ever told them off, they might shout at me. Guys, oh, I'm sorry, guys. Nah, they don't actually. I don't even know if they remember, to be honest.
Fair enough. Fair enough. They don't remember, man. That's a big moment. That's a good that's good vibes right there, I got to say. Anyhow, thank you very much for joining us, Shane. Another episode of Coach's Corner. This has been a great one. You're gonna have to come back sometime, Shane. We appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime, man. It's been a pleasure to have it. Pleasure being here.